Boris Johnson continues to ignite. Nevertheless, there is suddenly confidence in the Brexit negotiations between the EU and the British. It looks like the perfect Brexit storm. Despite all the protests from Brussels, the British government is still preparing to break the current Brexit treaty with the European Union. On Tuesday evening, the British House of Commons passed the controversial Single Market Act, which is intended to repeal central agreements between London and Brussels on the future status of Northern Ireland. And the EU, instead of breaking off negotiations on a new trade agreement and risking a hard Brexit, the Union remains demonstratively cool. It's quite possible that Johnson was aiming for a scandal and wanted to push the buck to us, but we will not allow ourselves to be provoked, said the Commission officials involved. Although Brussels now continues to complain of a breach of trust and reserves the right to take legal action against the United Kingdom, the last negotiation round on an agreement on future relations began on Tuesday as planned. Surprisingly, the top officials met in a comparatively confident mood. A turning point is emerging. A new trade agreement still seems possible. It is now said from both sides. Because while the dispute threatened to escalate on the front stage, behind the scenes progress has been made on the major issues. It is about the standards for access to the internal market, especially state aid from Great Britain for domestic companies, and the fisheries regulations. Brussels has also made concessions. For example, the British should not have to comply with the EU's new social and environmental standards later if they accept cutbacks in access to the internal market. And the Union is also clearing previous maximum demands for the fishing rights of EU fishermen in the British North Sea. As far as the rules for subsidies are concerned, however, Brussels has remained tough so far. This is where the main battle line runs. The EU wants to prevent British companies from gaining a competitive advantage in the internal market through lavish government aid. The British negotiators were also unsuccessful with a new compromise proposal on Tuesday. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is nevertheless optimistic. We want an agreement, and I am still convinced that an agreement is possible. Some observers fear that the EU might end up sacrificing too much under pressure to reach an agreement. We mustn't allow ourselves to be blackmailed by the British government, warns Franziska Brandner, spokeswoman for the European policy of the Bundestag Greens. I am concerned that we will get a bad result because the EU makes too many concessions. If substantial progress is to be made by Friday, the experts want to fine-tune the contract text in intensive discussions in the tunnel. EU chief negotiator Michel Barnier considers it unlikely that the result will be available by the summit of EU heads of government in mid-October, as Johnson has demanded, but Brussels also wants to be ready by the end of October. And that is not the last word. Even if, after an agreement, the ratification of the agreement does not succeed quite punctually by the end of the transition period at the turn of the year, this will not be a break in the leg, say EU diplomats. And the breach of contract? The Single Market Act passes on Tuesday, aims to undo part of the Brexit treaty that was passed at the beginning of the year. The British side would at least soften the agreed special rules for Northern Ireland, which are intended to prevent a fixed border with the EU member Ireland. In the optimistic variant, Johnson would not allow this law to come into force if an understanding was reached with the EU. After the House of Commons, the House of Lords still has to agree, and according to the Prime Minister's plans, that should take a lot of time with the deliberations. In good time, before the planned trade agreement is ratified, the law could be withdrawn and the conflict resolved, which would be enough to meet a demand from the EU side. The EU Parliament had threatened not to ratify the planned agreement if the Single Market Act went into effect unchanged. The head of the Brexit Committee in the EU Parliament, David McAllister, of my party, the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, reiterated on Tuesday. After the presentation of this draft law, we said across all political groups that if there is a threat of the announcement of a threat to the exit agreement, we will include the settlement on Northern Ireland, then would not be ready to ratify an agreement with the United Kingdom. Even if the prospect that everything will go well and that an agreement can still be reached are improving, nobody in Brussels wants to bet on that. Whether Johnson really wants a contract or no deal remains uncertain. The breach of contract he had prepared cost a lot of trust. The economy therefore remains extremely nervous. The no-deal scenario that continues to threaten would have devastating consequences for companies that are already struggling with the effects of COVID-19, warned the European Business Association at the start of the new round of negotiations. And as one of my videos was titled before, they said, we sleepwalk into the abyss. And if you now want to know more about European politics, YouTube has chosen another of my videos right here for you on the end screen, right next to your chance to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in my next video. Click and enjoy. Viel Spaß and Thanos in Day.